And really, Craig, something that we talked about that I really want this kind of to be on a weekly basis is I almost got tired of all the formal stuff,
You
right?
almost said it.
Yeah, I did. And there's so much going on in the industry that I almost want this to be like the big kids table that speaks the truth. You
Yeah.
know what I
Hey,
mean?
look, man, you know that's how I am anyways. I don't like I don't sugarcoat anything. It's
Yeah.
what you see is what you get. And I think to be fair to people, that's the way you need to operate. You need to be truthful and honest and not try to sugarcoat things. Look, there's a lot of things happen in our industry for sure. But there's a lot of good too, and we'll talk about both of those, and hopefully put things in perspective for people where they can take full advantage of things and you know, not be overwhelmed, but prioritize what they should be doing. So
Yeah, and you can put lipstick on pigs. I'm just saying.
you 100, what's up, Clinton? What's up, Clinton? Yeah, you're right. You can. Look, it's really, and a lot of, look, I think, I know we hadn't really got started yet. For those of you that are here already, it's really easy for companies to come out and kind of trying to spin things to suit what they're trying to accomplish, and we're just not that way, right? We're gonna be, truthful. It is what it is,
Right?
because you need to be able to, weed through all the crap, right, and figure out what it is you really should be focused on. So it's hard to do that if you're not getting 100% truthful information. So
Yeah, Dwight says, "How are you enjoying retirement?" I don't think
is that what
Craig.
he said? Dwight, come on, man, you know
I don't
that.
think Dwight knows
Look,
what you do.
I am busier now than I
Yeah,
have ever been, and honestly, I'm loving it because I just get to spend all my time, working with agencies and staff, and not the greatest thing is I don't have to worry about a roof claim that wasn't paid, and dealing with all that crap that here in the South. Golly, that's all we get hailstorm after hailstorm after hailstorm, and that's an area that has always been kind of a thorn in our side, is dealing with that crap. So now I can just work on things that are a lot more fun, and
helping
help
agents.
people. Yes,
I
yeah.
feel you.
So it's good. It's all good. Yes, we got a bunch of people jumping on. Yeah, and it's going to be really cool to do this, I think, on a consistent basis, um, and be able to share ideas and talk about things. And obviously, the topics will change up and you know be relevant to whatever's going on in that moment in time. But looking forward to it.
Let's see, Robert. We're going to give people about 2 or 3 minutes to stroll in before we kind of jump into it. Where's everybody from? If one of the important parts about this is the Q&A that we're going to get into. So
Colorado, Oklahoma.
make sure you know how to use the chat feature, especially as I expect us in the next couple of weeks to probably have hundreds and hundreds of attendees, right? Because this is free. So I would imagine this first coffee with closers session we'll be able to get to a lot of Q&As, but we'll have to limit Q&As in the future on repetitive topics and how much follow up and things like that. I see.
Yeah, and look, to be like fair about that, I think that most people don't want to block off more than, definitely more than 60 minutes. I think
Oh, sure.
the shorter you can keep it, then the more likely people are to attend and feel like they're getting some benefit from it. So, if we don't get to a question, then you can ask it the next week, or maybe ask it in the groups. I try to do the best I can to answer questions in the groups and, be helpful there. But yeah, I think this whole interactive way of dealing with this is exactly what people need for sure. So we got them from all over, man. California, Texas, Chicago, Tennessee, Texas, California. We got them all over the country. That's really cool. Really cool. Well, I'll let you kick it off whenever you're ready, Todd.
Yeah, let's do it. So again, everybody, thanks for attending. This is really going to be, I don't even know what we're going to call it yet, other than coffee with closers. This is really meant to be honest, just being honest about what's going on in the environment. We're not going to sit here and preach to you. I really just wanted to have an open circle, kind of a table where we could I'll have a topic once a week. And then, Craig can have a topic once a week, just kind of briefly go over the topic, and then really want to dive into what's going on in the markets, what's going on with you guys and your agencies, and how we might be able to give you some free advice on how to scale your agencies and overcome any kind of things that you're running into. So the first thing I wanted to get into today, I was going through my data. I'm a huge data guy, right? Like I love looking at numbers, and I know everybody from, some states have it a lot worse than other states. Like Florida right now, if you were a Florida farmer's agent for the last 2 years, you were writing business like there's no tomorrow. You were just crushing the market. Now they can't even write auto here soon. So there's been so many drastic changes going on between insurance carriers and different markets. And so I decided, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go pull data between, and I'm going to share my screen here. Can you enable my sharing, Greg?
Mm-hmm. Hang on. Let me go in here and change your. Hang on. All right, now you should have it.
All right. We see that?
Yep, I see it.
So something that I was really big on, I'm still big on, so I have to kind of preface, we are in a very unique time frame in a market. Like I view this as kind of and I'm broadly saying this, like the 08, 09 crash, as far as insurance goes, there is a crap ton of changes going on between carriers, irregardless if the market crashes or not, right? It's having a fun day today. There's a lot going on with carriers, and they were over leveraged in their underwriting and in their reinsurance costs. They were over leveraged in their investments in house. A lot of insurance carriers took too much risk. And so that's caused a lot of heartache and headache and a lot of changes to rates. And so here's something that I found that I want to show you, because I would always preach to everybody, track your zip codes where you're most competitive, laser target those, and market the hell out of them, right? That's what I'd say. And it makes perfect sense in a perfect world.
Sure.
But what I found is something really weird is happening, at least in my DFW area, and I would assume in a lot of other areas as well. So here's a time frame of November of last year to January of this year. These are zip codes. I've marked them out, but they're corresponding. So that's the same zip code from February of May to this year. Look at how drastic my closing ratios in just the last 3 months have become in this zip code that I was. So imagine I ran a report at the beginning of the year, which I did. I would be investing the heck out of this zip code because I have a 24% closing ratio. I'm going to target it and I'm going to just blow it up. I'm going to send all my expensive marketing there. As of right now, we have closed nothing in that zip code. So it went from my absolute, one of my top zip codes, to now our underwriters completely changed the pricing in that zip code. And so this needs to be a wake-up call for a lot of agents, because there's another caveat to that. Some of my worst, where I had like a 10%, are now my best. So my best are now my worst, and my worst are now my best. What does that mean? Because if anything, if I didn't change anything, or if I didn't track my information or know my information, I would be staring at my screen right now going, oh crap, I'm screwed. Like, why aren't we closing anything? Because all my marketing dollars, I'm focusing in on what I ran my last quarterly report is showing me I should be crushing it right now, right? But I'm not. What's going on? I'm just not closing anything. And so this has actually been one of our best sales months ever. And I haven't had time to pivot, right? So my pivot actually, I scratch that. I'm pivoting, but it won't hit like our direct mail and things like that. My internet leads can pivot immediately, but my direct mail is not going to pivot for another 2 to 4 weeks. However, something that you need to do if you've been tracking things like this is it's been our best sales month ever because we went back to all the old quotes that were from these zip codes and we're now crushing it. So we're calling back these prospects and saying, hey, we just lowered our rates in your area. I'm sure you took a rate increase with your current carrier. Can we give you a new quote? And so in just one zip code, we've closed 50% of home leads in a zip code that we closed 0 just 6 months ago, right? And so what I'm telling agents now, and I want to caveat this again, I'm only saying this temporarily until things shake out. I feel like we're in a huge, shakeout of what's happening cyclically between all the carriers and how they're going to increase rates or decrease rates or what markets they're going to go after. There's a huge shakeout going on. So and back in February, I posted in our think tank group in February, now is the time that you need to invest a significant amount of money in marketing and blanket the crap out of your area. And this is the exact reason why I said that, is because you're going to find out that there's going to be drastic changes in where you thought you were hot and you weren't, that you're going to need to be able to shift on a dime, right? So make sure you're going back in any zip codes that you weren't competitive in. Make sure you're going back and trying to attempt to requote those, especially now, and start to figure out where your competitors really took a lot of rate. And that's where you're going to start blowing it up. So hopefully, I know I can't give you your specific state area, your information on where you're at, but I wanted to show you this because this is what's happening in the market, and especially in my market. But I know it's happening in other markets too, because the DFW area is huge, right? So if it's happening here, it's happening everywhere else. So, I mean, that's what's your thoughts on that, Greg?
Oh, look, I think first of all, like we're talking about being honest and real with people. I think a lot of people listening, watching this right now, they don't have this data anyways. People are not keeping good data on what they're doing. So I think that's lesson number one. If you're not doing that now, you need to know where everything is going and what you're closing, what you're not closing, all the way down to the different lead sources that you have. So if you don't have that data now, I would strongly encourage you to do that. Second thing, ever since rate increases have become, much more prevalent this year. For some of you that have only been in the business for a short period of time, even if it's just been for a few years, you may not have been experiencing this type of volatility with your company because, we had this thing called COVID going on for a while, and basically rates were either flat or some companies were actually giving people money back, right? So what Todd said in terms of like blanketing your area and double down on your marketing, right now is the time to do that because you have so much market disruption. Your company's taking rates, yes, but so is everybody else. And they're doing it for a reason that's pretty easy to explain because of inflation. It's not like, some single carrier just has a problem with their combined ratio and they got to get things fixed internally for their customer. Right. This is everybody. So right now you need to double down on your marketing. You need to really think about, hey, I'm getting rate increase phone calls. I'm getting people calling upset about rates, but so is everybody else. And if you're not involved in that, and if you're not out there marketing to those people, you're going to miss out. For the last couple of years, sometimes it was hard to get people to talk to about some of this stuff because they weren't really experiencing any of that. Well, now they are. So I think what Todd what he just shared with you guys, number one, you got to have good data. You got to have good data. And it's just part of Todd. That's how he's wired. I wouldn't call him a nerd. I'd call him, he's a very successful guy because he has data, which is kind of the same thing, right? But he has that. You need to have that. If you don't know where your quotes are coming from, if you don't know what zip codes you're successful in, what lead sources are working, that's a whole nother problem in itself. And that's something that you can begin to work on, immediately, and start gathering that data. And the longer you do it, the better that data gets. But I think also the bigger message here is this business has a very pendulum effect, right? It goes back and forth. Leadership, whether it's the way they deal with their agents, rates, guidelines, there's all kinds of things where it goes back and forth. And I've seen this for 30 years. So if you have had great rates for a period of time, well, there's going to come a time where they're not going to be so great, and then it kind of goes back and forth. So right now, I think the lesson to learn or understand or really kind of embrace of all this is double down on your marketing, go all in on that, understand excuse me, that everybody's dealing with this. And the more of that you do, the more likely you are to run into people that are getting those increases. And then I think, what Todd pointed out, if you are keeping up with that data and you do have good information, then obviously go back to those places and spend more money there. And you're going to get, a better bang for your buck. I think being smart and being strategic about the way you run your business and not being, just reacting to things, that's what really sets people apart. That's why Todd has done so well in his business, and so many of the agencies that we work with, is because they have a plan. They're intentional. They do keep up with data. They do analyze these things. They just don't come in every day and hope that they're going to write some business and then, get down when it doesn't work out. They constantly are evaluating and looking for ways to get better. So for a lot of you on this call today, that's probably like the big picture thing to take away from this is you need that data, and you need to be able to pivot and go back and forth when the market dictates that, and look for areas of opportunity. So I'm glad you shared that, Todd. I think that's really good stuff.
Well, and there's another thing about that is also resetting your staff's mindset about rates. There's been too many times where, my staff have been, oh, it's this zip code, I know I'm going to get my butt kicked. Well, I just went and showed my staff this information this morning, and they were like, holy crap, a zip code we couldn't even write business in for an entire year. We have a 50% closing ratio in right now. And that's because the carriers that were there's a lot of independent carriers that were just buying up market share left and right in all these states. And now they over leveraged themselves, and now with their investments and what's going on, they're screwed, right? And so now they're taking 100% rate increases, 150% rate increases. So I've really having that information, or having that data, or even let's say a lot of you might not have that data, right? It's about just going to your staff and getting them to understand we are in a shakeup cycle. So whatever preconceived notions you had 2 months ago, you better throw that out the window, and you better be pounding the phone as fast as you can, because this shakeup only lasts for so long, right? I bet you in the next 6 to 8 months, most people are gonna, well, let's say 6 to 12 months, the real rate increases started pounding people back in March, February, right? So you have until March or February of next year before that shakeout really starts to settle down. And that's why I was saying back in February, you should go out and take a loan. You need to do something to invest big time over the next 12 months and just blow it up. Yes, you're going to waste some money in some areas, but again, it's cyclical. So I'm closing most of my new business. About 58% of my new business sales this month came from old leads that we thought we never had a prayer to close, right? So make sure you find however you can find those dollars to double down on marketing right now, and blanket, I would say, a radius around your area, and just start pounding the phones.
Yeah, and I think also, guys, you got to be a good leader with your team. That they're looking for you, they're looking at you for guidance as you're dealing with all this stuff. And I know rate increases are sometimes a really sore subject. I was in a district meeting a few weeks ago, and they were going through what they were going to get, and everybody's freaking out. And okay, I mean, you can do that, but with your team, you got to be a leader. They're looking to you to set the example. And It's kind of like when you're on an airplane, you know, and you hit a little turbulence and everybody looks up at the flight attendant and she's freaking out. The whole plane freaks out. She's up there, you know, reading her magazines. Okay, we're all good. Well, you need to be kind of that person, like say, hey, you know what? Rate increases are actually good. They help us with revenue. They help you make more money on your commissions. And like Todd is talking about, they definitely stir up the market. And you have to like look at that as, hey, it is what it is. Let's do the most we can to make it the most of the situation, and leverage it to good. You know, so if you're in there complaining about rate increases, if you're on the phone with your buddies complaining about rate increases, they're hearing all that stuff. It's trickling down to them, and you can almost develop a defeatist mindset with them when it comes to their marketing and their prospecting and their quoting, because they feel like you're just not competitive. And a lot of that's coming from what they're hearing from you. So be mindful of that. You know, talk about the good. Always try to find, there's always good in everything. You can find good in just about any situation. And with rate increases, there is a lot of good. There is a lot of good. If they make the same number of sales that they did before and the rates are higher, well, then they make more money, right? Your revenue grows. There's so many opportunities there. And then if you get really smart and surgical about it, the way Todd's talking about, well, then you can even have, you know, just as much, if not maybe more success. So I think you definitely need to keep that in mind, that you are leading that group. They are looking to you. They're listening to everything that you say and watching what you do and how you handle this and how you react. And if you handle it poorly, it's gonna show in their results. So just be careful about that.
Yeah, and I would also say that from my report, I had a couple of people ask where I got the report. It's inside Agency MVP. It's an Excel spreadsheet that downloads from all the data as we quote through Agency MVP. But something that I wanted to mention on that report, if you think about it, it was from November to January, and my best zip codes are now my worst. What that really means with all my direct mail, and it hurts me to say this because I have some marketing, I wasted a lot of money on direct mail those 3 months, right? Because the underwriting, the pricing, the competitors, shit changed, right? And so what happens to most people is they get in and they try a new marketing method, and they might be in a rate cycle or a shakeup, as we call it, and they think, oh man, that marketing sucked. But it didn't suck. It's you targeted the wrong spots at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. Right? It's aiming at you thought you had the best zip codes, but lo and behold, the market, you weren't aiming at the right place. So it takes time as you track these things to really fine tune your marketing. So I would also say right now, it would be quality of lead is most important, and training of staff. So when I say quality of lead, it would be underwriting rules for your carrier versus so much focused on the zip code. Like, I know my carrier won't approve this type of home. Okay, make sure in your data, we exclude that house from your data pool. So not so much in this rate environment, in this cycle, don't focus so much on zip codes. Focus more on common sense to your carrier underwriting rules. And then something like through Craig Wiggins coaching, make sure your team is the best of the best, and you're listening to calls and you've got them coached and they know how to sell really well. If you do those two things, that's how you're going to win in this current environment.
I agree. And what I would maybe differ with you on, I don't think you wasted that money. I think you invested that money because you had to go through that process to figure out what that data actually was, where you would have wasted it if you'd have done it for another year and a half. That'd have been a waste of money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You had to do that for that period of time to know, where you needed to shift. So, again, just trying to find the good in that. And look, I agree with you. I think that obviously, from a training perspective, when you are sending direct mail, when you're buying leads of any kind, your people need to know how to handle that. You can't just go out and invest. Like, we'll see these questions or comments in these groups all the time where 5 different people are having totally different results with the exact same vendor. Sometimes it's not the vendor, sometimes it's the process. And if you have people, that are getting direct mail phone calls, for example, and don't know how to overcome that initial pushback or the initial objection, maybe around the price or what they got mailed to them, you're going to struggle. You're going to have a difficult time quoting, you're going to have a difficult time selling. So you got to understand that, that the time you invest with your team and developing skills with them, that lasts for their career, especially if it's an ongoing thing and part of your culture. It's not just a matter of just getting your credit card out and trying to solve problems by buying leads. You got to have both sides of this. So, Todd is 100% right. Being surgical with where you are marketing, that's going to make a big difference. And then at the same time, your people have to understand what to say and how to say things, how to overcome those objections. It's just amazing when you start listening to calls. I think you made a post about this the other day. Listen to phone calls. Guys, if you're not listening to phone calls, you are missing out on the biggest area of opportunity in your agency. And I know it's time consuming. I get it. But what I would do when we first started doing this, I would listen to them at night. Everybody goes to bed and, I got a couple hours. I listen to calls and you start to learn, okay, I need to go to the very end of these calls because this person's pretty good up until this point. You start to learn, where maybe people have their weaknesses, but you got to address that. You got to deal with that. Otherwise, it's always fascinating to me when we work with an agency and they think their best producer is just freaking amazing, right? They're like, they can't do anything. Oh, they already got it all figured out. And then we listen to a call together and like, oh my God, I cannot.
All the time.
She said that. It's like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. And because they do a good job of maybe hiding that, whatever, or they are producing and then they think everything's fine. Man, there's always so much opportunity. It would blow your mind if you've never done this to actually go back and start listening, paying attention to that and picking up. And then when you coach them, the best advice I can give you is don't go in there with a laundry list of 30 things they need to fix. Just find one area of opportunity. Start with something positive, find an area of opportunity, end with something positive. That can be a really good 20, 30-minute coaching session. And then you move on to the next thing. And you understand that that's just it's a process. It's going to take time. You're not going to fix everything in a week or two. Some people, it's going to take them maybe even months before they get really, really good at things. But you've got to start that process. And if you don't, and if you're not seriously investing in your team to make them better, you're fighting the dollars you're spending on marketing because your people don't know how to improve. They're not improving and they're just doing the same thing every day. And you're looking at all these results. You're like, man, why is this not getting any better? Well, a lot of it's because your people are not getting any better. So you got to do both.
Yeah. And so when I was saying quality of lead, like you can't compare with a direct mail lead, somebody calling you for a quote versus an internet lead that you're chasing that they clicked a button when they were playing a game, right? So like with the quality of lead, if you're getting leads that are very high quality, which means the costs are going to be high, and you're not closing those, there's only two reasons why you're not closing them. You're in the wrong area, or you need to retrain your people, right? So I 100% agree with everything you just said too. We have like 5 minutes. Let's get some Q&As because that's something that I wanted to do on this Coffee with Closers. Is I just wanted to help you guys. We wanted to help you guys on whatever's going on. Obviously, the more complex the question, the less likely it is we can solve it. But let's figure out what's going on in your markets and how we might be able to help you.
100%. You can put it, just put it in the chat, and we'll just keep up with it in the chat for now. There have been a couple questions, Todd. I think mainly directed at you in your worksheet. Let's see here.
Yeah, that's a download straight out of Agency MVP.
Okay. All right.
Track on a quarterly basis.
Okay. And a lot of people ask what CRM everybody's using. Most people are answering Agency MVP, which is really, really smart. One question, how often do you run the report and how often do you make changes? That's probably a good question to talk about.
Quarterly, because I need to give, if you ever have gone to your state Department of Insurance and pulled rate filings from all the carriers, they typically all try to happen within the same quarter. Unfortunately, Farmers for me is always first to take rate increases. And then maybe 2 months later, Allstate does, and then maybe State Farm does. So if you're looking at it on a quarterly basis, that's probably the smartest way to do it. If you're, I used to drive myself crazy and go in there and pull it weekly. It doesn't do anything if you try to look at it that close of a time frame, because you have to wait for those rate filings to get approved and for it to hit the market and the effective dates of those rate increases. So if you just look at it quarterly, it just really helps you kind of guide your net on where you should be casting it.
So Todd Kelly asks, can our MVP sales rep help run that report?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What
How
other
about
questions you guys got?
hiring? Anybody having trouble hiring right now?
No, that's it. Everybody's got that. We don't even talk about that. This is the worst labor market I've seen in 30 years. It's not even close. It's crazy.
Or, the good news is I think it's going to get better.
I agree with you.
I really think it's going to get a lot better.
It's by default, right?
Yeah. I found, especially with hiring, the onboarding process, like with Craig Wiggins coaching, I found that many agents are uncomfortable enforcing that kind of onboarding experience, which makes them not weed out bad hires quick enough. And so if I can say anything that's extremely important and for me uncomfortable is you have to follow a strict onboarding experience or you're going to just waste so much time and money on people.
Yeah. Let me give you, excuse me, a couple tips on that is, coming up with a minimum standard. That's probably the biggest weakness in just about any agency that we run into where they're having problems is there's like this gray area between the goal and what has to happen to keep their job. And sometimes the owners don't even know what that is. The staff don't know what that is. And everybody's kind of like, well, we hope we get better and things work out. And there's like nothing defined. The best thing that you can do is determine what does somebody need to do, whether you measure it in premium, policies, items, whatever your measurement is. What do they need to do to be able to keep that job? What makes sense for you from an ROI perspective? Okay. And once you come up with that, let's just say it's $20,000 a month in premium. You got to hold them accountable to that. There has to be an onboarding process that creates a sense of urgency that gets people to that very quickly. And it doesn't take 90 days to get somebody up to speed. If you train them the right way, if you do the right things, you can get somebody up to speed within a couple of weeks. It doesn't take that long. Okay. But you've got to have a minimum standard. You have to have something that, look, if these people don't do this, just like if you had a manufacturing facility and there were 7 steps for them to follow on that manufacturing line, they only followed 5 of them, they would not last very long. They would be gone.
Yeah.
Agencies love to let them just hang around. They're doing 4 of the 7 steps and it's 9 months and I really like them, and they're going to get better and they try really. I get that. But sometimes to truly care about somebody and to be nice to them and do the best thing for them is to help them find another job if this is not going to be a good fit. Now, the other side of that is you have to be very honest with yourself. You have to realize or understand and maybe really get a good handle on, am I providing the right resources and training and marketing to hold this person to this standard, right? I can't just throw somebody in the deep end of the pool and hope that they turn into Michael Phelps. I've got to help them, right? So you have to be honest with yourself. So it goes both ways. Yes, we got to hold them accountable for sure, but we also have to be very, very sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing as well. And if not, either we have to lower our expectations to where those things meet, or we got to step up our game. But when you're hiring people, especially in today's world, and I get it, a lot of you like, man, I got to have somebody. If you want to just go hire a warm body to fill a desk, you can do that. You can go hire somebody if you want to do that. That's up to you. It's very expensive and it's going to cost you a lot of money over a period of time. Whereas instead of firing them 3 or 4 months down the road, I'd rather just fire them during the interview. Just fire them during the interview, or maybe that very first week. We've got an onboarding process that's worked for us for years. We share it. It's on the platform. It's really designed to get people up to speed quickly with a sense of urgency, with little things that they have to do right away, the very first day, to get them rolling. And if you skip those steps, people are just wired to get by. They're going to do, if someone gets through today and there's no negative consequence, they're going to do the same thing tomorrow. And they're going to do it again and again and again. Before you know it, you got a habit, you got a behavior. And then you go in there and try to unring that bell. and you can't. And it's
Nope.
harder, it's more difficult, and then you fail. So go back to the very beginning. Go back to the interview. Go back to that very first day, that very first week, those first few weeks, that first month. What are you doing to set the table to say, hey, this is what we have to do. You have to do this. This is the standard. And if you're not doing that, they're probably going to have a very difficult time getting them where you want. Like we have a lot of Century Club producers, and people always, how do you get them to that point? You get them to that point by getting them to reach their full potential. You get them there by getting them what they need to be the best that they can be. And sometimes it takes some months, sometimes it takes some years. Okay. But if I just have somebody come in and love their personality and they got a great smile and their mom is a realtor and they're going to get all this business, it's just all magically going to work out. It doesn't work that way. That's not how it works. You have to have some structure. So you got to bring them in and be intentional about getting them to be successful. And it starts during the interview. Talk about your standards, talk about your expectations, what they're going to have to do. How does that make you feel? Go through what's actually going to be required, right? And if you get negative pushback, if you've seen your red flags, then move on to somebody else. And I know it's going to take time. It's more time consuming to hire that way. I totally get that. But you end up with a so much better candidate that the chances of success are dramatically higher. And in the long run, it costs you a lot less money. So, filling seats, you can do that. And a lot of people do it. It's rare that works out very well. And you spend a ton of money going through that process before you finally realize, you know what, maybe if I did have some structure to this, I'd be a lot better off.
Right. That what's funny is my worst hire I ever made, their mom was a real estate agent. So when you said that, I was like,
well, they come to you and we think that what happens is, and look, I've been doing this forever, guys. You're so desperate to fill that seat. You're looking for any window. Oh, they're going to be great because of, right? And rarely does that actually work out. There's a reason why that doesn't work out. Just because their mom or their brother or even their wife is in the mortgage business or real estate business, whatever, that doesn't mean anything. If you don't set them up the right way with some accountability, with some standards, with some training, some development, coaching, all that, it's very, very difficult to get them where they need to go. You just kind of got to luck out and find the right person. And I'd rather just depend on what we can control than worrying about, just getting lucky.
Right. Well, it's 12:34. So let's, anybody got any questions? We'll have to figure out a way to make people feel comfortable typing out questions. I know it can be kind of uncomfortable.
You know what? Here's the thing. We do these things all the time. Sometimes people don't want to ask. Look, you're not coming on camera. All you're doing is writing it out. It's not that big a deal. And chances are, whatever question you have, it's probably some other people ask. They're thinking the same thing. So someone just gotta ask it, And if it's not a great, there's no dumb questions, right? So, but if you got a question, just ask. Look, we're Todd. Maybe you guys don't know us that well. I don't know. I've known Todd for a while. We're pretty good friends, and he's genuinely just trying to help people, and that's exactly that's what I'm trying to do. Right? Is there's a lot of people who are struggling in this industry. And sometimes just hearing, some different way to do something that can make all the difference in the world. So we want to help. All right, we get a good question. Who here is implementing a remote hybrid workforce? You got any remote or hybrid folks?
I do. So I have remote. My best producer during COVID has a son that had special health requirements. And so she went remote. And really, because of the systems I have in place, it doesn't matter where that person is.
Nope.
At all. And she's still she is my best producer still, right? So I feel like if you're going to work any kind of remote person, it's all about the interview process, right? I think you should take a little bit more extra time in interviewing that person. And as long as you have good tracking systems in place for activity and you're monitoring activity, there's no reason to have a bigger office space. I mean, that's just lower overhead costs. And now I'd be really cautious about any kind of overseas or international VAs, just if, a lot of carriers have big issues with that if they're logging in. There's things called VPNs, but I didn't just say that. But you know what I mean? Like there's definitely, especially all the people saying that they were in California. You know how cheap you can get people in like Ohio right now? So if the way of the future is definitely going remote.
That's what I would say. I'd say, look, if you're not considering remote now, you definitely it needs to be something that you're going to be doing in the future, because people have options, man. If COVID created this giant opportunity for people to work remote. And just like if you don't have health insurance and you lose out on somebody because another company offers it, well, if another company offers somebody a remote position and you don't, you're going to lose out on those people. And, look, our last 5 agents that we hired, they were all remote. And there's ways to hold them accountable. And what we do, just kind of like give you a little idea, is we have them on Zoom, when they first start, typically for the first month or so, they're just on Zoom all day long with their sales manager, whoever's working with them. And if you're the only person that does that, then fine, put them on Zoom. I mean, what's the difference? If they're in the same, room with you, or if they're 500 miles away and they're on Zoom, it's kind of the same thing. We have the lines muted where each person can unmute and talk to the other person. But having standards over what they have to do every day and hold them accountable to that's really the key, and it works out, so there is, like when Todd talked about the overseas, there are some things that you need to understand when you make a hire of someone out of state. There are some states that have kind of like some tricky things when it comes to their taxes and the way they, the way they work with all that in your payroll. You need to be mindful of that. But just as a general rule, I would highly encourage you to start thinking about what you need to do to make remote a possibility, because if you don't, you're going to miss out on some candidates. Let's see, we had a couple of questions coming in here, Todd, while we were answering that. Here's a question for you. Hey, Todd, how many leads a day are you purchasing?
So my rule of thumb is 5,000 meal pieces per producer. And then we get some free leads that come through our farmers website. And then I purchase about 2 EverQuote leads a day per producer. And then I kind of fill the gap where needed with things like internet leads. If our quote volume is down 1 month, like for example, our closing ratio was down on direct mail leads the last quarter. So we pumped up a lot of internet leads. But then we found out that the other zip codes were on fire. So now we're going back to all our old leads and just closing the hell out of those. And I turned down the internet leads. So it's really about knowing where you're hot, where you're not, and how to target.
All right, here's a question. It's a long one, but I'm gonna read the whole thing. Danielle asked, hired a veteran producer from the independent world. She couldn't make it within the captive world. Her leads come strictly from her networking, and we were lots of O's there, so uncompetitive that she could not write enough to cover her salary. I have a hard time finding someone of quality who doesn't want a large base because working off commissions is not working out. It almost seems like we need to have more of a call center approach where people are making hundreds of calls a day, as opposed to the good old days where relationships were enough. Can you enlighten me on how you can afford to pay people a decent salary they can live off of and get them to write enough to cover that?
I love this question.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. I'll have
Look, I think, I'll be glad to answer it. I think there's a lot of components to that. All right. Number one, everybody's not going to be a good fit in your agency. And I don't care if they're a veteran producer or not. Okay. Yep. Just because they're a veteran producer, a lot of times veteran producers, they have baggage. I'm not saying that person did, but a lot of times they do, because they learned under a different environment. If you are running an agency that has very high standards, high quality, demand a lot, sometimes vets are the worst people you can hire. You're better off to find someone that has the ability to sell, and then you teach them insurance. So that would be number one. Number two is, I think you got to teach people to sell on value. They can't be out there quoting all day long, every day, trying to save somebody $8 a month on their car insurance. It's just a never ending battle. They get them frustrated and they get burned out. Whereas if I teach somebody how to sell, where price is always going to be important, I get that, but I can get them to win some of those people that they were losing before, I've got a much better chance of helping that person be successful. There's sometimes when you quote somebody and you're lower and they still don't change because it's not cheap enough, right? So we got to create a sense of urgency to get somebody to move over. When it comes to the actual, like the comp structure itself, the salary plus commission, what we try to do is we try to demonstrate the total opportunity. So we take the salary, we've got a great tool on the platform that you can plug in your salary, your average premium, the number of policies or items that they're going to write, and it will show them, for whatever your comp plan is. We use a tiered comp plan where it goes up based on the number of items they write and number of policies they write. I show them what the total opportunity is, and we focus on that. So we don't focus on the salary plus commission. We focus on the total opportunity, and then we put them in a position to be successful. We are going to go through what's important to them. What do they want to accomplish? What do they want to do with their money? And then whatever those goals are, back that into our comp plan with our average premium. Here's what you've got to do to make that happen. And then we go through the actual day. What do they got to do to get to that point? How many quotes, how many calls? So look, there's no easy answer for somebody that comes in and just doesn't make it. But overall, if you have structure to all this, if you have a plan, if you have an onboarding process that makes sense, if you're selling on value where you're getting rid of price, like what you said at the very end about creating this call center type environment where we're just going to call. I think that's probably the worst thing you can do. Yes, they need to be on the phone, but trying to hire somebody to just call enough people to find somebody where they're cheaper, and that's going to be your strategy, that's exactly how people get burned out. That's how they get frustrated. They just get defeated and then they quit, or they just never really performed to where they could. So we want to spend time with them, teaching them how to deliver, how to deliver the value proposition of your agency. And yes, price is important, but you know what? I guarantee you, everybody on this call, you got one of these. You got either an iPhone or an Android. You didn't go to Walmart and buy a $30 flip phone or a burner, right? You pay where you see value. If something makes sense to you, you pay for it. Customers, your prospects are the same way. We just have to present that value and understand that everybody's not going to listen to that. Everybody's not going to listen to your advice and your recommendations. But if we can just get one or two a day to listen to what we're saying, then chances are that person's going to be successful. And then that average salary and that commission plan, all that is all going to work out. And then the last question, I'll let Todd chime in. How do you afford the salary? Look, you afford the salary by making sure these people are going to work out, right? If I'm looking at paying somebody, let's just say it's a $2,000 a month salary, or $3,000, it doesn't really matter. Whatever that number is, when I onboard somebody, I'm going to know by day 4 or 5 at the latest if this person's a good fit or not. So I'm really only risking 1 week. So even if they're on a $3,000 or $4,000 a month salary, it's not that much money in the big scheme of things because we get them rolling quickly. Now, if you're going to pay them $3,000 or $4,000 a month and it takes you 6 or 7 or 9 months to figure it out, well, yes, that's a significant investment. So the number one thing you can do is go in there and create this environment where you find out quicker, hopefully during the interview, but at the worst case, the 4th or 5th day of that first week, and then that will minimize your loss. Todd, what you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I would say, looking at the question, the leads were coming from her networking.
Yes.
So what I heard in the question was Danielle hired another agent. She didn't hire another producer. Because if you don't have systems set up in place in your agency, you don't have to have a call center, but you have to have marketing. You have, or else what you're doing is just trying to replicate yourself and finding an agent who can go source their own leads and do their own thing, and that's never going to work unless you find a unicorn, right? Somebody who has their own side mortgage business and they just have really successful and whatever the case may be. So I would say that what I do is I have systems in place, marketing systems in place that monitor, do I have excess leads that aren't being worked, that are competitive or that I could possibly close? Once my marketing system's in play and I have excess, that means I don't have enough warm-bodied producers to plug and play. Because if I do, at that point, I know what my closing ratios are, I know what the average commissions are, and I know what kind of salary and commission structure I can offer. So really having those systems set up, especially your marketing system that can support a producer, is the first step in before I even think about hiring a salesperson, right? Now with like CWC's onboarding, it's amazing to have them get an up fast start, getting their own quotes, getting their own, learning how to close, quote, and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, you don't want that to run out, and then you don't have a marketing system in play for them, right? So if you don't have your marketing system set up as a business owner, what you're trying to do there doesn't look like it's going to work ever. That'd be what I add to that.
I agreed. I think you got to be very intentional with it. And look, guys, here another thing that I would say to you about hires is anytime the hiring process doesn't work out, right? Someone quits, you have to fire them, whatever. Go back and think, what could I have done different to either avoid this hire to begin with or make sure this person was successful, and make that a part of your hiring process. And that's what we've tried to do. And if you're on the platform and you pull these documents and these processes out, that's exactly what we've done through the years. It's like, all right, every time someone didn't work out, what could we go back in and try to fix that for the next person? And now it's a pretty good system. I mean, we're pretty successful. We bring somebody on, I feel 90% confident that they're going to work out, especially if they get through that first week. All right, one other question, Todd. What's the best way to find competitive zip codes starting scratch without years of data? Like, where would you go if you didn't already have all that data right now? What could you recommend?
Sometimes carriers will share that information with their agents. But again, I think in this market cycle, all data from the past 12 months is complete crap just because of the shakeup going on. So that's why I'm going to go back and tell you the number one thing to do right now is quality of leads for underwriting and for, the person actually wanted to get a quote, quality of leads and underwriting, and then do a pretty decent size radius and double down on your marketing expense. And then make sure your team is trained and ready to close. And that's the next 12 months. If you don't have that down pat, if you're not taking that kind of risk, with expenses, you're going to miss out on some huge opportunity right now.
And here's just while we have just a few more minutes, because I don't think we're going to stop at the top of the hour. Just something else to really think about, guys, is yes, lead volume and buying leads in the right zip codes, all that is definitely critical. But also think about a couple things. Number one, are you getting everything that you can from what you already have, right? Like for your producers, are they bundling the entire household? Are they truly getting every line that person has when they finally get somebody on the phone? I mean, think about it. All day long, they're spending all this time to get somebody on the phone, whether it's from a paid lead or an outbound phone call or whatever, right? They spend all this time and energy, and they finally get somebody on the phone, and a lot of times they only quote one line. They get at least a little bit of pushback, and then they cave. It's kind of like in a football game, if we ran the ball down to the 1 yard line and we just kick a field goal on second down. Now, Todd's Cowboys, they might do that because they would probably fumble and they would never get a touchdown anyways. But most teams would not do that, right? Well, why would we let our producers do all this work and then just quote one line? So that's first thing. We need to be bundling. Second thing is, how often are they actually asking for any kind of referral? We call them introductions. We don't really call them referrals. But is that happening? Is that like consistent at all? Are they doing anything on the back end of a sale to try to get another free lead? Maybe not. I don't know. So that's one area. And then the second thing is, I'm an old guy. I've been doing this a long time. I think there's a lot of people that kind of need to go back to school on the way we generate leads. I think that, going old school with mortgage officers, centers of influence, realtors, look, that's a great way to drive business. And some people don't want to do it. It's all back end loaded. It takes time. I get that. But you need to start making that a mix of what you do. I think consumer behavior in general is going to make it harder and harder and harder going forward with paid leads and outbound phone calls. So just try to reach people and quote them. You got to be having folks that are sending business to you on a regular basis. So if you're not already carving time out of your week right now to visit with loan officers, realtors, apartment complexes, that type of thing, you really ought to start doing that. But really, like, holding your team accountable to what they're doing every day with what you already have. So many agencies, I don't care if you've been in business for a year, you have a lot of things in front of you right now. And when you listen to those calls and you look at what they're doing, they're not maximizing everything. They're not. They're caving and giving up really quickly when someone says they don't have time, or at the very end, there's no effort whatsoever to get an introduction. Maybe that's something that we could work on maybe in their next call, is kind of go through some of those things that people could do a little differently to drive more, because that's a great way to start. Instead of just, again, getting your credit card out and hoping that's going to solve all your problems, let's look at what we already have. Like, how can we do more of what we've already got, just by doing some training and holding some people accountable and listening to some calls. You might find you get a pretty good lift in there, which then brings your overall acquisition cost down, which allows you to go buy more leads. And then that's what really is the catalyst to your growth. So I would encourage you guys to think about that as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see. I thought there was one other question in here. Maybe you answered that. Oh yeah, you did. How far out you go? 50 miles. All right. Well,
Hey,
very good. Anything else?
fun, man.
We're getting close to the top of the hour.
It's been fun. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for your time. I know it's extremely valuable. And every Wednesday at noon, right? That's the plan.
Yeah, we'll do this every week. As long as people want, if they're willing to jump on. Look, guys, we just want to help y'all. Whatever. There's so much out there, and a lot of times people fail or they have difficulty because they just don't know or don't have good direction. And if we can help with that, we want to do that. So if you got a topic that you're curious about, feel free to post it in the group. Reach out to one of us. We'll help you any way that we can. But I look forward to doing more and more of these and just trying to help. I think there's a lot of good that comes from a community where people are genuinely trying to help one another. I know Todd feels that way, and hopefully we can have an impact on people and make a difference.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, buddy.
All right, man.
Everybody take it easy. Have a good one.
What's that?
I said, everybody take it easy.
Absolutely. You guys have a great week. We'll talk to y'all later.